They say the United States is a global champion of democracy. But what happens when that same democracy promotion results in dictatorship, repression, and decades of suffering? Today, we're exploring one of the most powerful examples of hypocrisy in modern geopolitics: how the United States destroyed a democratic government in Iran, empowered a brutal monarch, and ignited a revolution that still shapes the world today. In the early 20th century, Iran, then known as Persia, was under the Qajar dynasty. But a new movement was emerging, one calling for constitutional rule, democracy, and national independence. By the early 1950s, Iran had a functioning parliament and a charismatic, democratically elected prime minister, Mohammad Mossadegh. A secular nationalist and fierce anti-colonialist, Mossadegh's mission was clear: free Iran from foreign domination. And at the center of this struggle, oil. Iran's oil industry was controlled by the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, a British corporation, which would later become BP. Despite the oil being on Iranian soil, the British took most of the profits, while Iranians remained poor. In 1951, Mossadegh nationalized the oil industry, reclaiming Iranian resources for the Iranian people. It was a bold, defiant move, and it made him a national hero. But in London and Washington, it was seen as a threat, not just to profits, but to the global order built on Western control. Britain appealed to the US for help. At first, President Truman refused respecting Iran's right to self-determination. But that changed in 1953 with President Eisenhower and the rise of Cold War paranoia. The CIA and British MI6 launched Operation Ajax, a secret mission to overthrow Mossadegh. They paid off media outlets to spread lies about him, bribed politicians, clergy, and thugs to stage protests and riots, pressured the Shah to dismiss Mossadegh illegally. On August 19, 1953, the coup succeeded. Mossadegh was arrested, imprisoned, and later placed under house arrest until his death. Iran's fragile democracy was shattered, and the Shah was back in power, stronger than ever. With US backing, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi Shah turned Iran into a police state. His secret police, Savak, trained and funded by the CIA and Mossad, tortured, disappeared, and executed dissidents. Under the surface of economic modernization, political parties were banned. Opposition leaders were jailed. Journalists and students were silenced. Iran was a key US ally in the Middle East, a buffer against Soviet influence, and a lucrative arms buyer. So the White House praised the Shah as a modernizer and ignored the oppression. But resentment was building. People hadn't forgotten Mossadegh or the coup. By the late 1970s, millions of Iranians had lost patience. From secular nationalists to Islamic clerics, the opposition united under one message: down with the Shah, down with foreign puppets. In 1979, after mass protests and brutal crackdowns, the Shah fled Iran, and a new regime led by Ayatollah Khomeini was born. This wasn't just an Islamic revolution. It was a revolution against imperialism, against Western interference, against the trauma of 1953. In the eyes of the new Islamic Republic, America was the great Satan. The US embassy in Tehran was stormed, and 52 American diplomats were held hostage for 444 days. Washington responded with sanctions, isolation, and later, indirect support for Saddam Hussein during the Iran-Iraq war that cost over 1 million lives. Decades of hostility followed. The 1995 total US embargo on Iran, the 2000s nuclear standoff, and ongoing threats of war, regime change, and economic strangulation, all rooted in mistrust that began in 1953. Iran is not alone. From Chile to Guatemala, Vietnam to Iraq, the US has a long history of destroying democracies in the name of freedom. In Iran's case, the cost was immense. A thriving democracy extinguished. A brutal regime installed. Revolution radicalized by foreign betrayal. And a nation locked in conflict with the West for over 70 years. This is what happens when the rhetoric of democracy becomes a mask for empire. So the next time you hear a politician speak of promoting democracy abroad, ask yourself, whose democracy? Whose interests? And who pays the price? Iran paid the price, it remembers. If you found this video insightful, like, share, and subscribe. Let's bring history back into the conversation because memory is resistance.